5 miles above Bavaria's frozen countryside, the winter air turned to ice inside oxygen masks. Major Bill Stanton gripped the control stick of his P-51 Mustang, leading his formation across a landscape where snow blanketed everything below. He'd flown this route dozens of times. Today felt different. The radio crackled with urgency. Bandits closing from above. Bill's head snapped upward, searching the white contrails that crisscrossed the sky like chalk marks on a board. Below them, 96 B-17 bombers pushed steadily toward Munich, their heavy guns useless against fighters, their survival depending entirely on the Mustangs weaving through the clouds above. Then he saw it. Not an aircraft yet, just a contrail. A single white line screaming down from 30,000 feet, accelerating in a way that made his stomach drop. Whatever was making that trail moved faster than anything his pilots had encountered. Brake right. Now. His hand threw the stick over hard. 4 Gs of force crushed him into his seat as his wingman, 21-year-old Lieutenant Danny Rizzo from Brooklyn, rolled tight on his right wing. They'd flown together for months. Danny stuck with him like a younger brother, afraid to lose sight of his older sibling. The Me-262 materialized from nowhere. Bill's brain photographed every detail in frozen sequence. Shark nose, swept wings, twin engines slung below like torpedoes. No propeller, just pure speed. The jet tore through their formation at 520 miles per hour, a grey blur against the winter sky that lasted only seconds. Danny's Mustang simply came apart. No explosion, no dramatic burst of flame. One moment the aircraft existed, the next it was tumbling wreckage, wings separating, fuselage folding, pieces cartwheeling through space, trailing smoke and fuel. The parachute never opened. Bill watched it all happen in 3 seconds. 21 years old, engaged to a girl in Red Hook, sent half his pay home to his widowed mother, hummed Glenn Miller songs over the radio. Gone. The jet was already 2 miles distant, climbing away without effort. Bill's hands moved on instinct. He shoved the throttle all the way forward, pushed his nose over and dove after it. His Mustang screamed downward, accelerating through 380 miles per hour. The airframe shook violently. Controls stiffened as he pushed past red line limits. The needle on his airspeed indicator buried itself in the red zone. He had everything a fighter pilot could want. 6 50 caliber machine guns, 1,800 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition, a computing gun sight set for 300 yards. None of it mattered. The Me-262 pulled away like he was standing still. The mathematics were brutal and absolute. 520 minus 380, 140 miles per hour faster. The gap widened with every second that passed. You cannot shoot what you cannot catch. Bill pulled out of the dive at 15,000 feet, breathing hard, sweat freezing on his face despite the cold. Around him, the formation had scattered like leaves. 3 Mustangs were simply gone, erased from the sky. The bombers pressed on toward their target, completely unaware. Radio voices overlapped in controlled panic. Where did it come from? I never saw him. Jesus Christ, what was that thing? He reformed his remaining fighters, tucked them back alongside the bomber stream, and finished the mission by the book. Escorted the B-17s to target, watched them drop their loads, brought them home. Everything by doctrine. Everything that 8th Air Force demanded. 3 of his men were dead because of it. That night at Liston Airfield in England, Bill stood outside the Nissan hut while the rest of his squadron drank inside, trying to forget. A clerk had pressed an envelope into his palm without a word. He opened it slowly. Danny's handwriting, posted 3 days ago. Mom, we're finally winning. The Germans are almost done. I'll be home by summer. Love, Danny. Bill read it twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket right over his heart. Overhead, stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there in the German night, those jets were refueling, rearming, preparing to kill more of his men tomorrow. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands and stared east toward enemy territory. Something had to change. The rules that kept them alive yesterday were killing them today. In his engineer's mind, trained to see patterns in chaos, a dangerous thought began forming. If we cannot catch them in the air, where can we catch them? 5 days later, on January 25th, Bill stood at the front of the briefing room, chalk dust coating his hands. 30 pilots sat on wooden benches in the thick smoke and metallic smell of repeatedly boiled coffee. Their breath fogged in the unheated Nissan hut. "Gentlemen, we stop chasing them in the air. We hunt them on the ground." The room went silent. Not the silence of attention, but the silence of shock. Captain Eddie Frost, a 20-year-old replacement from Texas with barely 15 combat hours, leaned forward. "Sir, you mean strafe the airfields?" Bill nodded. "Intelligence confirms the Me-262s operate from known bases. Acme, Rhine, Hopston. They need concrete runways, minimum 1,800 meters for jet operations. We know where they live. We wait for them to come home." The group operations officer stood up. His face looked like weathered leather from 3 years of combat. "Stanton, that's suicide. Those fields are ringed with 88mm flak batteries. And the 8th Air Force wants every Mustang escorting bombers. You can't pull fighters off mission to freelance ground attacks." Bill had expected this objection. He'd spent 3 sleepless nights calculating fuel burns, studying reconnaissance photographs until his eyes burned, working through every counter-argument. "We don't pull off mission, we hit them during egress, after we bring the bombers home. We don't go low, we loiter at 15,000 feet above the flak ceiling. We wait for them to land. We catch them below 250 miles per hour during final approach." He drew it all on the chalkboard. Altitude brackets, patrol patterns, attack angles. The math was elegant and brutal. Colonel James Whitaker sat in the back corner nursing his 4th cup of coffee. A West Point graduate who'd learned in North Africa that good officers gave orders while great officers knew when to look the other way. He watched Bill present with methodical precision, watched the younger pilots lean in with hungry attention, watched the room divide between believers and skeptics. Finally, he stood. "Negative. 8th Air Force doctrine is clear. Primary mission is bomber escort. Jets are secondary targets of opportunity only. Unauthorized ground attack operations are prohibited." He let that hang in the cold air for 3 heartbeats. "However, if you happen to encounter enemy aircraft during egress that would be within operational parameters." Bill met his eyes. Whitaker was giving him permission, wrapped in deniability. If it worked, the colonel would take credit. If it failed, Bill would fall. 200 miles east across enemy lines, a 22-year-old Bavarian farm boy named Klaus Brenner worked in the maintenance hangar at Acme Airfield. Oil stained his fingernails. His father had been a craftsman, and Klaus had inherited the gift for precision. In peacetime, he wanted to be a veterinarian. Now he kept jets flying with salvaged parts and prayer. The Jumo 004 engines were temperamental. Axial flow turbines that consumed 1,800 liters of fuel every hour and broke down if you looked at them wrong. Klaus knew every quirk, every sound that meant trouble. He could diagnose a failing turbine bearing from 50 meters away just by listening. Major Georg Eiders arrived that afternoon, his Me-262 screaming in for landing with both engines failing. He climbed from the cockpit grinning, leather flight jacket unzipped despite the cold, a dueling scar visible on his left cheek. 78 kills. A Prussian aristocrat who treated the war like a personal hunting preserve. 6 Mustangs today, like shooting ducks in a pond. Have it ready by 0600 tomorrow. Klaus nodded but said nothing. He'd learned not to celebrate. The fuel logs told a different story. Germany was running dry. The Reich had enough aviation fuel for maybe 60 more jet sorties. Possibly fewer. After that, these magnificent machines would sit on the ground like sculptures. Beautiful, useless, dead. That night, Klaus lay in his bunk, doing arithmetic in his head. 60 sorties divided by 12 operational aircraft. 5 missions per jet. 5 more times Eiders would climb into that cockpit and hunt. Then what? Klaus knew the answer. Then the Americans would come, and there would be nothing left to stop them. On January 28th, Bill's flight arrived over Acme at 16:45 hours, 45 minutes before sunset. From 14,000 feet, they watched and waited. At 16:45 precisely, 3 Me-262s entered the landing pattern. Bill counted seconds, measured their descent, from 280 miles per hour approach speed to wheels down. 90 seconds, altitude loss of 1,200 feet. The jets were committed now. Unable to maneuver, trapped by physics and fuel margins. Red flight on me, we're going in. Bill rolled inverted and pulled through 4 negative Gs, driving blood into his skull. Vision tunneled red at the edges. His Packard Merlin engine screamed as he dove from 14,000 feet toward the unsuspecting jets below. Airspeed built rapidly, 300, 350, 400 miles per hour. The control stick vibrated in his hands, the entire airframe shaking as he pushed past operational limits. Ahead and below, the lead Me-262 floated down final approach at 220 miles per hour. Flaps extended, landing gear deployed, locked into a glide path that could not be abandoned without stalling. Bill steadied his breathing. He centered his illuminated gun sight on the jet's fuselage and closed to 400 yards. Outside the effective range of the airfield's heavy flak batteries, but well within the kill zone for his 50 caliber machine guns. 350 yards, 375. He squeezed the trigger. 6 machine guns erupted simultaneously, 60 rounds per second. The night was about to change. Tracers carved through the darkness in brilliant orange streaks, bending through the air like molten ribbons. The gun camera recorded every second. Bill steadied his aim, walking the fire up the jet's fuselage, feeling the Mustang buck and shudder with each burst. The recoil pressed him deeper into his seat. Sparks erupted along the Me-262's right engine nacelle, bright pinpricks of impact. Then the engine tore itself apart. The Jumo's 004 turbine, spinning at 8,700 revolutions per minute, came apart like it had swallowed a grenade. Compressor blades snapped free, punched through the thin aluminum skin, and shredded the fuel lines to nothing. Fire consumed the jet instantly. The aircraft rolled right, starved for lift on a single engine at landing speed, and tumbled into a snow-covered field beside the runway. Black smoke climbed into the sky, visible from miles away. Bill hauled back on the stick at 8,000 feet. 6 Gs crushed him into the seat with merciless force. Grey curtains crept in from the edges of his vision, threatening to steal his consciousness. His 2 wingmen, combat veterans who'd been flying alongside him since D-Day, rolled in behind him on the remaining Me-262. Bill watched them work. They moved with mechanical precision, no wasted motion. The second jet attempted a go-around. Both throttles shoved to full, but jets needed altitude and airspeed to dance in the sky. At 200 feet and 230 miles per hour, it had neither advantage. 50 caliber rounds tore through the cockpit canopy. The pilot's body went slack. The jet's nose dropped like a stone and punched into the earth in an explosion of flame and twisted metal. The third Me-262 never got its chance. It was still descending on final approach, wheels just 20 feet from the tarmac. When the third Mustang opened fire from directly behind, both engines ignited simultaneously. The jet slammed belly first onto the runway in a shower of sparks that lit the darkness, then skidded for what felt like forever, before coming to rest, burning like a funeral pyre. Then the flak opened up. 88mm guns, radar-directed and hungry, capable of hurling 25-pound shells to 30,000 feet. But Bill had prepared for this moment. He'd memorized the gun positions from reconnaissance photos, calculated their effective ranges down to the yard, and timed his attack run to stay just outside their reach. Now he climbed hard, throttle pushed to the limit, clawing the Mustang back up to 12,000 feet where the flak gunners couldn't touch him with any accuracy. Black puffs of smoke bracketed his flight, close enough to shake the aircraft in their blast waves. But nothing found its mark. Almost nothing. Red section number 4 took a hit. Shrapnel tore through the right wing, severing hydraulic lines in a cascade of damage. The pilot's voice crackled over the radio, tight with barely contained fear. Red 4, I'm hit. Hydraulics are gone, heading west. Bill tracked him peeling off into the clouds, leaving a trail of vapor behind, and silently hoped he'd make it across the front lines before he had to bail out. 3 Me-262s destroyed, 1 P-51 damaged, 1 pilot whose fate hung in the balance. Bill's hands trembled on the control stick as he reformed his remaining fighters and set course for home. Below, Akmer Airfield had become a nightmare of chaos. Fire trucks raced toward burning wreckage. Sirens wailed their helpless songs. Black smoke towered into the evening sky like a monument to destruction. Bill forced himself to look at it, to really see what he'd done. Men were down there, German men, maybe Klaus Brenner among them, though Bill didn't know Brenner existed. They'd been landing, helpless and exposed, and he'd killed them. Not in a fair fight. In an ambush. The knowledge settled in his stomach like lead, heavy and indigestible. But then he thought of Danny, just 21 years old, falling out of the sky in pieces. He thought of the 3 other pilots lost that same day. He thought of all those B-17 crews these jets would have massacred tomorrow if those 3 Me-262s had survived. War didn't offer clean choices. It only offered brutal mathematics, impossible equations where every decision cost lives. He landed at Leiston at 18:30 hours. His Mustang bore 47 bullet holes from ground fire he hadn't even noticed during the attack. The ground crew chief, a sergeant from Alabama who'd kept Bill's aircraft flying for 8 months, walked around the plane shaking his head in amazement. "Major, you're either the luckiest son of a bitch in the 8th Air Force or the craziest. Maybe both." Word spread through the fighter groups like wildfire. February 3rd, 4 Me-262s destroyed at Rheine by the 356th Fighter Group. February 9th, 6 more at Leipzig by the 4th Fighter Group. Pilots started taking matters into their own hands, breaking off bomber escort to hunt jet bases during the return journey. For 2 weeks, the tactic worked brilliantly. Luftwaffe jet losses spiked. Kill ratios reversed. American pilots who'd felt helpless against the Me-262's speed finally had a weapon they could use. Bill refined the technique with each mission. He timed attacks for 1600 to 1800 hours when the low sun blinded German gunners. He maintained patrol altitude between 12 and 15,000 feet, staying above effective flak range but below escort altitude. He calculated fuel reserves down to the gallon. A P-51D carried 269 gallons internally, plus 2 external drop tanks of 110 gallons each. That meant 489 gallons total. Cruising at 280 miles per hour burned 82 gallons per hour, giving them nearly 6 hours of endurance. They could afford to wait, to watch, to choose their moment. Then 8th Air Force Headquarters erupted. February 14th, a telegram arrived marked urgent. All fighter groups conducting unauthorized ground attack operations will face court-martial. Primary mission remains bomber escort. No exceptions. The reason came swiftly in casualty reports. While Mustang squadrons hunted jets, bomber formations flew without protection. On February the 10th, a B-17 group approaching Frankfurt got massacred by conventional Messerschmitts. 12 bombers lost, 120 men dead or captured. All because their assigned fighter escort was 50 miles away attacking an airfield. The calculus had shifted again. Saving fighter pilots by destroying jets on the ground meant sacrificing bomber crews in the air. There was no answer that didn't end in death. Bill received a summons to Colonel Whitaker's office on February the 15th. The colonel sat behind his desk, with a glass of single malt scotch, untouched, and a folder marked confidential. He didn't invite Bill to sit. "They're talking about relieving you. 3 squadron leaders are facing courts-martial. Headquarters has made their position crystal clear," Whitaker said, voice carefully neutral. Bill stood at attention, jaw clenched, and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The charges were accurate. He had disobeyed orders deliberately again and again because the orders were wrong. Whitaker opened the folder, studied it in silence for a long moment, then looked up. 19 jets in 2 weeks, Bill. 19. Before your innovation, they were killing us 3-1. Now we're killing them 6-1. He closed the folder with deliberate finality. They can't court-martial you without admitting the tactic works. And if they admit it works, they have to explain why they're forbidding it. So instead, you're getting a written reprimand that sits in your file and ends any promotion hopes. If you ever do this again, I can't protect you." He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Then he added quietly, "Keep doing it, but when they come for you, I never gave authorization." That night, Bill lay awake in his bunk, reading casualty reports by flashlight. Week of February 25th through March 3rd, with the airfield tactics suspended. 47 American bombers lost, 14 to Me-262s, 2 to other aircraft. Week of February the 3rd through 10th, with the tactic active. 23 bombers lost total. The numbers told an undeniable story. His fist hit the wall hard enough to split his knuckles. Blood welled up, warm and red. "We were stopping them," he said into the empty darkness. 200 miles east at Akmer, Klaus Brenner felt pressure lift from his shoulders. More jets returned intact now, fewer bullet holes puncturing the fuselages. Major Gaia strutted around the hangar again, arrogant and invulnerable, boasting about 6 kills in a single morning. But Klaus noticed details the pilots overlooked. Fuel trucks arrived half empty. Spare parts shipments had stopped. He was cannibalizing destroyed jets to keep operational ones in the air. One night, walking past the officers' quarters, he overheard words through an open window. "Berlin says 2 weeks of fuel remaining. After that, we're grounded." Klaus stopped in the darkness and felt something shift inside him. The Americans didn't need to shoot them down anymore, they just needed to wait. Germany was bleeding out. Everyone knew it, except the men who still climbed into cockpits every morning. On March 1st, Bill's investigation concluded with a formal reprimand and immediate return to flight status. The Allied advance needed every pilot flying. He walked into the ready room where younger pilots were suiting up for escort duty. Captain Eddie Frost looked up, eyes bright with awe. "Major, is it true you killed 12 jets?" Bill nodded once. Eddie swallowed hard. "Will you teach me?" March 18th, 1945. Dawn briefing at Lisbon. The war had drawn so close that pilots could hear distant artillery thunder if the wind carried it right. Bill's grounding had been lifted 3 weeks earlier. The Allied advance across Germany needed every available fighter. Today's mission was standard procedure. Bomber escort to Munich, 240 B-17s hitting rail yards. But intelligence had spotted unusual activity at Akmer airfield. Twice the normal traffic. Aircraft being fueled and armed around the clock. Something significant was happening. Bill requested permission to investigate after completing his primary mission. This time Colonel Whitaker didn't hesitate. Approved, clear to engage targets of opportunity. The room understood what those words meant. The forbidden tactic was now sanctioned. Too many jets had returned to the sky after the February crackdown, and too many bombers had paid in blood. At 14:30 hours, at 15,000 feet over Akmer, Bill counted aircraft on the ground through scattered clouds. 12 Me-262s, more than he'd ever seen in one location. Pilots scrambling, ground crews swarming everywhere, engines spooling up with that distinctive jet howl that still made his stomach clench with anticipation. Whatever the Luftwaffe was planning, it was happening now. He keyed the radio, voice calm despite his racing pulse. "Red flight, we're going in. Stay above 10,000 on the initial pass. Watch for flak." On the ground, Klaus Brenner worked with desperate speed. Orders had arrived at 0600. Launch everything operational. This was the last major sortie. Fuel was exhausted after today, literally finished. The last trucks had arrived at dawn with barely enough for one mission per aircraft. Klaus patched a bullet-riddled engine, welding sheet metal salvaged from destroyed fuselages, knowing it wouldn't save them. Knowing this was performance, theater, the final thrashing of something already dead. Major Gaia walked past, paused, and turned back. For once the arrogance had vanished from his face. He looked exhausted, ancient. "Klaus, if we don't come back, thank you for keeping us flying." Klaus couldn't speak. He just nodded, throat tight. Gaia walked toward his jet, 78 kills painted on the fuselage, and climbed into the cockpit for what both men understood might be the last time. Bill rolled inverted at 14,000 feet. He pulled -4 Gs until his vision swam red and dove. The Mustang accelerated viciously, 350 to 420 miles per hour. The stick shook so hard, his hands went numb. Below, 3 Me-262s were accelerating down the runway, wheels still touching concrete, not yet airborne. 180 miles per hour. Committed. Vulnerable. Bill centered the gun sight reticle, closed to 300 yards, and squeezed the trigger. The 50s hammered, tracers streamed down in brilliant orange arcs. Strikes erupted along the lead jet's left engine. The Jumo's turbine exploded at critical thrust. 8,700 RPM coming apart in a cascade of shrapnel and fire. The jet slewed hard right, out of control, and clipped the second aircraft. Both cartwheeled off the runway in flames, wings tearing loose, fuselages disintegrating into pieces. The third jet aborted takeoff, locked its brakes, and skidded to a stop, trailing smoke. 5 more Mustangs dove with Bill, each selecting targets. The airfield descended into chaos. Flak burst black and orange. Tracer fire stitched the sky from ground positions. Jets tried to scramble while under attack. Bill pulled out of his dive at 2,000 feet, yanking 6 Gs that crushed him into the seat, graying his vision to a tunnel. Behind him, 8 Me-262s burned. 3 escaped into the air, clawing for altitude. 1 P-51 took a direct hit from an 88mm shell. The entire right wing sheared off cleanly. The fuselage tumbled, spinning wildly, no parachute. Bill saw it happen in his peripheral vision. Couldn't look away. Couldn't help. The pilot's name was Anderson, a replacement from Iowa, 23 years old, married. Bill had approved his leave request 2 days ago. Klaus stood beside Major Geyer's burning jet, watching the Mustangs climb away into the evening sun, black silhouettes against brilliant orange sky. Geyer's aircraft was one of the wrecks on the runway, cockpit crushed, fire already fading. Klaus sank to his knees in the snow, surrounded by burning metal and the chemical stench of spilled fuel. Around him, ground crews stood silent, stunned. The war for them had just ended. Not with surrender or formal defeat, but with simple mathematics. No fuel, no aircraft, no point. Bill landed at Leiston at 1800 hours. His Mustang bore 47 new bullet holes from ground fire. He climbed out on shaking legs, didn't hear the ground crew's congratulations, walked past the debriefing room to his quarters. That night, he sat at the small wooden desk and opened his journal. Not to write a report, not to count kills, just to write. We found a way to fight the unfightable. We broke the rules because the rules were killing us. 30 men are alive today because we adapted. Danny would have done the same.